Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to webinar number 11. My name is Jan Eelman. I am the founder of Servoy, and again I am joined by Sean Devlin. Sean, welcome.
Hi, Jan. Thanks.
Today's webinar, before we get started, one more note about Servoy World. The schedule, as we can probably see on the next slide, is completed. There are still 2 or 3 more sessions to come, but the main schedule is up on our website. So if you go to our homepage or to servoy.com/ServoyWorld, there's a link now to the schedule, so you can start planning what sessions you want to go to. And the training classes are getting full. So if you are interested in following a training, then make sure to subscribe in time. Last year we had to disappoint a few people because we tried to keep the classes small enough that everybody can follow along. So on Wednesday, May 17, there will be a session on building your first web component. So this is great if you're new to web components and Servoy and NG client. There will be a session on end-to-end testing, how to build and write and execute tests for your Servoy applications. And then there will be, the third session will be Go NG, which is an intermediate web client, NG client session. Then on Saturday after the conference, there will be Advanced Servoy by Sean himself. There will be a Servoy starter training. So if you're new to Servoy, this is a great training to join. And then there will also be an advanced web component training. So if you already feel quite confident with web components, and this training number 6 is the best one for you to go to. If you have any questions during this webinar, then feel free to post them in the questions channel. We are here to answer all your questions and ready to take them for you. All right, without further ado, again, I'm really excited. Session number 11, and again about web components, some great updates that Sean will be presenting with you. And as usual, he is well prepared. He's been preparing this for weeks, as always. Sean.
Well prepared, yeah. Cramming it in last minute. But we're committed to doing this every 2 weeks because if we waited till everything was perfect, then we wouldn't be showing you stuff very frequently. So better to keep the heartbeat going. Yeah, today we're back on web components. We're trying to mix in our topics. So about every 3 sessions or so, we're doing an update on what's new in the world of web components and NG services. So this one will be all sort of NG client focused. Today's agenda, we have 2 new NG services available and 2 new Bootstrap extra components. The last web component update, we showed the whole repository of the Bootstrap extra components. There was quite a few, and since then my colleague Patrick Russert has added 2 others and prepared some samples for that. So then we're going to demo these, and then we'll talk about sort of how they work and how you can find out more. So let's jump into the demo. I'm going to go over to my browser. If you were in the last tech webinar, you'll remember that we introduced this sample gallery. So the goal going forward is that all of the example solutions that we build to show a new web component or a new module or even a best practice, we're going to be able to not only deliver the source code to you, not only record the webinar, but also actually have it live on a sample gallery so you can go find it and try it out. And that's also sort of the home base where you can get to all the other links. So I'm actually running this locally today. I tried to push a build up just before the webinar. Unfortunately, I had some issues with that, and I decided that better to focus on getting the webinar ready, and afterwards we can deploy this next build of the sample gallery, so you guys can go to demo.servoy.com and check it out. So let's jump into the Bootstrap extras. I'm sort of hiding all the other ones, so we focus on just the 2 new ones here. We have the drop-down component and the progress bar component. They're both pretty simple. The drop-down component comes in a few flavors. The most plain one, the unstyled one, or if you will, is just a simple link. So you click on it and you get a drop-down menu. And of course, when you click on any of those items, you can see that you can handle the callback, and down here we're displaying what the last callback was. You can also have a drop-down button, so rather than a link, it just looks like a button. And again, the same sort of thing. You can also have the Bootstrap split button, so if I click the menu drop-down, I get the menu, but if I just click the button itself, then I get the action handler for that button. This is what the disabled version of it looks like, and of course you can programmatically create and modify the drop-down. So if I create a drop-down menu and sort of append it to that one that was disabled, now you can see that I have the split one with the drop-down, and of course I can handle the click callbacks. And even after I've created it, let's say I wanted to add an action to it, I can add another menu item, and now you can see I've added one there. I can disable it, re-enable it, etc. So fully programmable, easy to set up at design time and also interact with at runtime. Let's dive in real quick to developer and have a look. You can see that on my form I dropped those 3 components. The simple one, the first one was the link one, and you can see in the properties panel I haven't checked that it's a button or a split button, and therefore I get the link view. There's also no additional styling, so this is the very plain Jane one. You can see that there's 2 events. There's the on action and on menu item selected. I'm not handling on action here. In this case, it's just showing the menu, and then when I select an item, it calls this method. The menu itself is here under menu items, which is an array of these menu item objects, and they're pretty simple. You give the text, you give the, it can have a specific action handler if you want. You can also add dividers. You can see that some of these may have a font icon. I'll find one that does. Last one. There's the font awesome car style class, which gives us that little icon. And of course, anywhere you can show text, you can do everything like merge text and I18N and markup, etc. So fully functional that way. The other 2 are just variations of that. So it's the same component, but in this case, I have is button toggled. I get the sort of the same menu items here, but I just toggled is button. And then the third one is button and is split button toggle, and that's what gave us the split versus the drop down. You'll also notice that the on action is supplied in this one versus these other 2, it's not. So if you're doing the split button, then you handle both the on action and the on menu item selected. So that's pretty much how it works. And programmatically creating the drop down, we'll just take a look at the code real quick. It's really easy. It's just a simple array of items that you can pass in to set the items, and then call set menu items. And of course, you can change the text, the style class. If I show you this in the, let me grab one of these and show you in the editor, you can see the properties here. So anything we did at design time, we can do programmatically, and then there's also the API for interacting with the menu items. So that is the Bootstrap drop-down. There's one other Bootstrap extra that we have. Let's take a look at our sample here. It is the progress bar. So a progress bar, of course, shows the indication of progress on some action. It's pretty simple. You have a minimum value, a maximum value, and the current value, and then the progress bar shows you, visualizes that. I'm going to click the randomize button here, and it's just going to kind of take us through the, the different randomized values. So you can see that the first 3 and the last one all animate as the value changes. However, this orange one here has no animation applied. So it just changes instantaneously. These are all different options that you can apply, whether or not there's the zebra stripes, or if you're showing the absolute value or the value as a percentage. And of course, the most realistic example of this would be if you were actually doing some action on the server that maybe took longer than a user is used to waiting for, so you want to show a progress indicator, and because the NG client is enabled with WebSockets, you can actually just push down the value to the browser very easily just by setting the value of that component, and it will always update whatever the progress is on the server. So no hacking tricks to do that. It's all right in the API. Let's jump in and take a look. So here we have our progress bars laid out. I'll just click on one of these and you can see some of the properties here, whether or not it animates. Of course, you set the max value, and the current value you can have starting at design time. There's some style class available, so you can apply style class. There's some built-in ones like doing the progress striped. And of course, you can see that for the other ones, there's just some different options like showing value or showing percentage. If we look at the perform heavy job, this is simulating a heavy job because all we're really doing is sleeping the thread every iteration. So iterating 1 to 200, and every time I'm going to sleep 10 milliseconds, and every time I'm going to increment the progress with the current value. So set progress I. If we look at the runtime API here, you can see all of the properties available design time are available programmatically, and you can programmatically set the progress or update the progress bar. So you can imagine that if you were doing some heavy batch update or something, that in a for loop, all you have to do is call this method set progress, and that will actually socket down to the browser and tell it what value the progress bar should be set at. So this is really nice for enhancing the UX. All right, back to our new NG services. Remember that an NG service is it's not really a component that you put on a form and design. It's more of an API that you can call that does something directly in the browser. So the first one is the block UI service. And this is ideal if you want to sort of block the UI while some action happens momentarily on the server, so that you block the user from doing anything. Also, you give them the feedback so they know that this will be done shortly. So we have in this service quite some options. The kind of spinner you want to show, a bit about the colors and the opacity. Also an option to add a delay so it doesn't start right away. This is useful if you want to maybe cancel it before it's even shown, because you might not know that if it's going to take half a second or 10 seconds before you start something. If you put in a delay, then maybe you just don't even want to show this for something really short. So you have that option without needing to know that up front. So let's take a look. Okay, pretty easy. I might want to change to, I don't know, pulse. And of course I can change things like make the overlay color maybe something more dithered. Now you can see it's a bit grayer. And of course you could change the spinner color. Let's make it, I don't know, blue. So pretty easy to work with. You can also use your own custom styling, so you can add some CSS to it. If we want to take a look at this in developer, let's close these guys down and bring it up. It is, I believe, this one right here. So if we look at really what's going on here, all of that stuff is captured in form variables, and these are just properties. Remember that an NG service is exposed as another plugin, so it's just plugins.svy block UI, and then we can set what all the properties are. We can set any kind of message that we want, and style class, and I'm sorry, the message is set when you actually call it. Set the style class, and that you can see down here what it's doing is updating the message as well. So the first one shows it. So maybe we're about to save in a transaction and it takes, I don't know, 10 seconds or something. So we show it, but throughout the progress, we might also want to update and say, hey, now we're saving this part, now we're saving that part. So you can also do that. Again, that sockets down to the browser and updates that right in the browser. and we're sleeping the thread here a second every time. That just simulates something taking longer. So that's where you would insert some real logic. And then at the very end, you can stop it, and that will hide it. One thing that I didn't show was this delay. So if, let's say I didn't want this to show for a whole second. Now you can see after I've pushed the button, it took a second. It may be that if the function ran quickly enough and called to hide before that second, then we would never even see the blocker. And so that's a nice little feature. So you're not like constantly showing this when you don't need it. So there's, I think, 11 spinners here. So you can go and try that out and have fun with it. Finally, we're going to do another NG service. This one is called Key Listener, and it's a simple service to send keystrokes to the server so you can handle in a callback method. The example that I came up with here would be actually doing searches in a grid on keystrokes. Rather than searching in memory in a grid, this could be done as real queries, which is the way I have it set up here. So if I was typing in keystrokes instead of, I forgot to add the listener. Add the listener. Okay. I start typing in the keystrokes, you can see that quickly I narrow down to my result. So traditionally in Servoy, you don't have an event for this. You have an event, you know, on action or on data change on the field, but this is a way of adding an event listener down to the browser so that it tells you to run a callback method on the server on every keystroke. Pretty simple to implement. If we take a look at this, it is key listener example. And if we look at, the add listener method here, it has one method, plugins.keyListener, add key listener. You give it the component. I was going to do a password thing, that's why I called this PW, but instead I did the search. So I pass in that element, which was the text field that I was typing in, and then my callback on key here, which is a function down here where I was printing out to the console. If I move my GoToMeeting thing, I can show you that. You can see here I was printing out every callback that was sent up. So I typed CHOP, and it sent one for each keystroke. So that was sent, and then I ran my search method, which just runs a query, little query builder, and searched some of the columns that were there on the grid to contain a case insensitive contains on company name and the sales rep and the country. So pretty easy to implement. You can do whatever you want in the callback. I should say though that this is sending every keystroke, so you want to keep performance in mind and use some discretion on what you use this for. We may look into ways to optimize the performance of this. Maybe it's not ideal to send every keystroke. Maybe there should be a delay built in so that if you type really quickly, it'll wait until input stops for an arbitrary, I don't know, 200 milliseconds or something, and then send the request. So there could be a little delay built in to throttle it down a bit. So maybe something like that. There's also, this is still released in beta, there's also a known issue that sometimes if you try to attach a key listener on show of the form, we don't really know when all of the elements have fully rendered down in the browser. It's not really possible to know that. So some elements get missed. We have a fix for this in 8.2 that allows us to add attributes, and then we can bind directly to components of that attribute. So there will be a fix for that. So keep those two ideas in mind. Number one, performance. Number two, that on show is not super reliable. So you may have to find another place to add the listener. But go ahead and try it out and give us some feedback. One more thing that I just want to remind you about all of these is that if you look at any one of the examples I've shown you, is that more information is available right here in the, oops, I have a style issue there. More information is available right here in the client. Also code examples. If you want to find the project home, I jumped right here to the wiki documentation. And of course, if you want to download a sample, I get the .servoy file of this exact, not the full gallery, just the individual sample that I'm looking at available through download. So that's what we're trying to do here, is that everything we show you is going to have handlers for these 4 buttons. So it's pretty easy to just go and see what's available and take it from there. We realize that not all of the demos that we've done so far are on here. Not all of the components or services or modules that we've released on GitHub are on here. It's going to take a little bit of time to get everything in there, but it's coming together, and I expect over the next few weeks that this site really starts to become a bit more of a real thing than just a demo. So I encourage you guys to go to demo.servoy.com after I push the new WAR file up, so that you can try out these new samples. You can also just go directly to some useful links here. Servoy, or github.com/servoy, and that's where all of these projects live. Demo.servoy.com is where the sample gallery is, and of course we'll take feedback on the forum. And if you want to catch any recordings or stay up to date on announcements, go to the tech series link on our site. Jan, do we have any questions?
Yeah, thanks for the great demo again. A couple of questions coming in. On the drop-down button, can you also display an icon, is a question from Andreas.
On the drop-down button, can you display an icon? On the button itself, yeah, I think that should be possible. I haven't tried.
All right, Patrick says he doesn't think so yet.
Okay.
File a request, this is his suggestion.
Yeah, go to the GitHub issue tracker for that and file a request.
Is the submenu orientation settable? There's a question from Andreas as well.
The submenu orientation, meaning, I don't know exactly what that means.
That's a good question. But Andreas, perhaps you can expand on your question. Then the next question is from Bob. For the block UI, is the best practice like the Buzzy plugin and do in a try catch block so you can unblock manually, or does it unblock on an error?
I don't think it's going to unblock on an error, so I think that you probably want to do that. You probably want to do that in a try catch manually. There's also a known issue with that if you refresh the page, like the whole browser page, then you lose the blocker. It won't stay there. So it's kind of really just down in the browser. I've also seen one other example where someone had shown a dialog, but there was a timing issue, and so they couldn't close the modal dialog because the blocker was on top of it. So there's potentially a timing issue if you show a modal dialog in close proximity in time to the blocker. But again, all of these issues can be resolved if you try these out, and if you find any issues, to file them on the project GitHub issue trackers for each individual project.
Right. All right, so Andreas has expanded on this question, and he means that in your example you have the submenu, that the small pointer on the right-hand side of the text. Can you also put it on the other side?
Yeah, Patrick, if you're on the webinar, maybe you can answer that. I think maybe with CSS, is it possible?
Patrick says not sure, so I guess that means that Andreas will have to file an issue on Git so that we can dive into it and not let it drop off our to-do list. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, then it looks like we're a few minutes before time. What is up in the next session, Sean?
So, like I said, we want to mix in stuff that's focused on the NG client, but also not forgetting about other areas. So next we're going to talk about war deployment. Jan made this title, not me. War deployment is an alternative to the traditional .servoy import files. It's a way of deploying the entire build, including all the dependencies. So it's pretty powerful. It's also therefore more complicated. So we've seen some folks asking questions about this and struggling with this a bit. So next session, April 19th, is a best practices on war deployment. And for those of you who are maybe new to that, who aren't using the NG client, this also applies to the other client types as well. This is required for doing the NG client, but the other client types, this is also supported. So it's for you as well.